Yes. Welcome to the Irish NFL show, brought to you in partnership with QuinBet. It's very exciting new music. You heard it there. We've got an all-new season coming up. We've done our roster cuts. We've slimmed it down to the five you see here tonight. It's Brian O'Leary, Shane Brennan, Kieran Boyle, and Noel Dowling, and myself, Conor Brophy, with you for the season ahead, through thick and through thin. Tonight is the night we're going to nail our colours to the mast firmly. We're going division by division. We're going conference by conference. We're going to pick our division winners, and we're going to lay down our wildcard picks as well. So we'll each have a playoff bracket etched in stone that we will be referring back to through the season, both for bragging and for slagging rights, depending on how it goes as the weeks progress. At time of recording, we're just a week away from regular season kickoff. We have the Aer Lingus College Football Classic, sadly in the rearview mirror, but I guess we're already looking forward to Farmageddon next year when Kansas State take on Iowa State at the Aviva. We are looking forward, though, now to the NFL curtain raiser, which is next Thursday night at time that we're recording. As I say, that's an AFC clash between the Ravens and the Chiefs, a repeat of the AFC Conference Championship game, which finished 17-10 to the Chiefs, as many of you will know. And we're going to start with the AFC tonight for our picks, both for division winners and for wildcards. We'll do our Super Bowl picks next week, so you can hang on to that one and hold us to that as the season progresses as well. So we're not going to do that tonight. We'll keep you in suspense on that one. But just to be clear, we're going to break down each division as we go. We'll each declare our division winners, and then we'll recap with our wildcard picks at the end. We've already submitted them. Brian has them in the envelope. He's got PwC on standby there to ensure the security of all of the different picks. We've also managed, or I managed at least, I'm going to call my own foul here, to pick. Did I have 9 wild cards or 8? I think I had
You gave me 4, Connor. Yeah, I thought you were getting some special treatments because year 2 in the franchise, and someone allowed you to have 4 picks. You were getting greedy.
I was overruled following the owners' meeting. Right, let's kick off with the AFC West, and it is to you that we go, Brian. Chiefs, of course, emerged on top last year and went all the way, so that's why we're starting there in honour of the Super Bowl champions, the reigning Super Bowl champions, going for that historic three-peat. Do you think that they will get there, and does this start with them winning the AFC West in your view?
I'm not entirely sure whether they'll get there. I think there's a lot of competition ahead of us in the AFC. I feel sorry for the other teams in this division. I had a fan, not necessarily a Broncos fan, maybe people would assume it's a Broncos fan, but another fan of the AFC West say this is getting quite boring, and how can you all enjoy and be enticed by watching Patrick Mahomes every year? But he's arguably the best quarterback in the league, and as long as he's around and he's fully functioning and playing really well, and when Andy Reid is the head coach, it's hard to argue. I put it back on this fan that, it's about time someone in the division start really giving them a proper challenge. I think it's 8 or 9 years in a row they've won the division, and here they go again. It looks inevitable. It's probably one of the easier starts this evening, Connor. I think I'd be surprised if anyone's going to go against the Chiefs. It looks like it's a foregone conclusion. This is kind of reminds me of the Patriots back in the day. People who used to back the Patriots to win the Super Bowl, essentially, they knew the East was there for them. They needed the home field advantage, and then they run it to the Super Bowl, and it feels like that's really where the Chiefs will be come January. But I'm sure there'll be other teams that are thinking they can take them this time.
I think we're going to end up running through the AFC West in about 30 seconds the way we're going. You took the words out of my mouth, Brian, because I was thinking Patriots, and Shane was trying to stifle the smile and the grin there. And it's interesting the way the AFC West is falling now, because it is quite similar to the way the Patriots were in their heyday of dominance in the AFC East. And that not only were they brilliant, and not only did they have Tom Brady, they just happened to be in a division where everybody else sucked. And that didn't hurt either, as you were saying, because they got a run and start on their Super Bowl bid every year. Shane, do you see it the same way that Brian sees it?
Yeah, I understand Brian's point that it's about time that somebody in the AFC West starts trying to put the pressure on. But in the same way that Spurs put the pressure on every year, that doesn't mean they're actually going to topple the real giants on top. But I think, you're really looking at the Chargers. How well can they do to really make a push? The Raiders are still in kind of rebuild mode. We're not quite sure we can expect enough consistency from them. And the Broncos this year is all about trying to rebuild their quarterback situation after quite a disastrous run with Russell Wilson, to be fair. And Sean Payton is a man to maybe bind that group together in the future, but I don't think this season is a time when the Chiefs, who are still riding exceptionally high and winning 2 Super Bowls in a year, have proved that when the offense lets them down, 2 things will step in place to make sure they're strong. The defense, which did absolutely excellently last year, and Patrick Mahomes, who was by far the best player in the league. If anybody's going to stop the Chiefs from winning the AFC title, it's going to be whoever they play against in the playoffs. Probably somebody from the AFC North. I don't think the Chargers have enough in them to properly press on to really get to the Chiefs level. They'll be close. there will be a couple of times we'll be seeing this year and thinking, I don't know, maybe the Chargers, maybe the year where Harbaugh has come in and really drill into these guys to make sure that they get enough out of themselves. You know, not to evoke memories of the AFC East of old too much, but I just think this is it's going to be another cakewalk for the Chiefs here.
Yeah, I'll take up that theme, and maybe I'll take it from the perspective of what needs to happen for the Chiefs not to win the division. So what would need to happen elsewhere? Well, either Bo needs to know football and needs to know pretty quickly and be the CJ Stroud of this year, and the Broncos suddenly catch fire. That's a long shot, I got to say. Yeah, I'm very interested to see how the Jim Harbaugh experiment works out with the Chargers. I could go either way on that one, as I was saying when we were doing our tiered list. I can see the argument for him invigorating and bringing that iron brand of discipline and getting the thing going. I'm not so sure he's necessarily the man for the job now, and I kind of wonder if the NFL hasn't passed him by based on the way he constructed his championship winning roster at Michigan, and whether that template transfers neatly to the NFL and to the AFC West. I remain to be convinced. The one thing that I think might potentially be a little bit interesting is Vegas. I mean, one of the things I took away from receiver from the NFL series, which obviously followed Devontae Adams among the other group of receivers that it followed, including George Kittle, Justin Jefferson, and Deebo Samuel, was just the transformation. And we saw this a little bit from the outside, and there was plenty of talk about it at the time when Antonio Pierce actually got that gig. Obviously, he came in as interim coach during the period in which receiver was recording. But there does seem to be a new vibe there. Things do seem to be a little bit more upbeat, a lot more upbeat than they were when Josh McDaniels was at the helm. Sometimes that can make a difference. Obviously, it's Gardner Minshew, and we'll see whether Gardner could do. I guess if you like, if you're looking for Bo Nix to be this year's CJ Stroud, if you're a Denver fan, you're looking for Gardner Minshew to be this year's Baker Mayfield in Vegas if they're going to get rolling. That's one thing I'm kind of interested to watch. Do I think that that's going to get rolling to such a degree that it's going to dethrone the Chiefs? I do not think so. Kieran and Noel, can we get your picks, please, before we move on to our next division?
Yeah, I mean this is a no-brainer. I mean, you saw Patrick Mahomes is in preseason, or mid-season form already. You saw that flick pass to Kelsey a couple of weeks back. I mean, that the division has not really kept up with them. I don't think the Raiders. I think it's going to be a down year for the Raiders. I don't put much stock into their chances this year. And the Chargers. The only thing I can tell you with the Chargers is they're going to run the hell out of the ball. Other than that, I don't know how they're going to react to Harbaugh. But it's, I think it's, I don't want to say it's a foregone conclusion unless something wild happens, but I can see the Chiefs winning this by 2 games, maybe even 3.
Chargers going to party like it's 1999. I'm not sure the NFL is ready for the run first and run second option. Noel, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm not going to shock you at all, guys. I mean, I have to go lockstep with the rest of you. There's too many questions about the other teams in this division for me, and the Chiefs are just the dream of the NFL. They're obviously the champions, and everyone else just looks like they're in some sort of rebuild or trying to figure out exactly what they've got or who they are. And it would be a monumental shift of power in that division if someone else was able to overtake the Chiefs. So it's not going to happen for me in the foreseeable anyway. Certainly not this season.
As we move to the AFC North, Noel, conveniently, as we've just been talking largely about the Chiefs and how I think across the board we all expect them to win the AFC West. Their opponents in the season opener on Thursday night are obviously the Baltimore Ravens, who were kings in the AFC North last year. Noel, do you see them repeating?
I do, but obviously this is such an incredibly tough division to kind of pick. For me, like say, the worst team in the division would be the Steelers, but then we know a Mike Tomlin, team never goes less than a winning record in a season, so you don't know what they could do. They could easily sneak into a wild card spot. You then have the Bengals, obviously. Joe Burrow there. When you've got that kind of a quarterback and Jamar Chase, things just happen. You have that ability. They maybe have a few questions on defense, but you think that offense can really cause trouble for teams. And then for me, the Browns are kind of the opposite. I think that Browns defense is really, really strong. But for me, that all comes down to a Deshaun Watson, and we know how patchy he's been. I think he's played 12 games in the last 2 or 3 seasons there. So for me, I just think the Ravens, they have their own question marks. I'll be interested to see this offensive line. It's been all changed there. They obviously lose their defensive coordinator in Mike McDonald, so we'll see if that can have any sort of impact. But really, the Ravens are a class outfit. John Harbaugh has done an excellent job there. You've got Lamar Jackson. They bring in Derrick Henry. If he's even half the guy player he's been over the last number of years, he'll be a massive upgrade. So for me, I just think the Ravens will probably be strong enough to top what I think will be a really competitive and tough division.
Yeah, I don't think anybody expects this to be anything other than the same sort of keenly contested division that it was last year, Kieran. I think there's an argument that this is the best coached set of teams in the NFL, the best set of coaches. You got Tomlin in there, you got Harbaugh in there, as Noel's just been saying. You got Zach Taylor in there, and you got Kevin Stefanski, the reigning coach of the year, of course. Those two teams, the Bengals and the Browns, finished with winning records last year, despite not having their starting quarterback for most of the season. Stefanski had 5 different starters at one point and still managed to make the playoffs with the Browns. Very difficult to predict.
It is. I mean, the AFC North, it's almost like the throwback to the old 50s and 60s, blood, mud, and tears. It's, it envisions up, images of Cleveland in the snow in December, or Pittsburgh with mud flying everywhere. I actually have the Bengals winning this by a hair. I think this is the year of Joe Burrow. I think the only guy that can put it up to Mahomes, in not just in the AFC, but in football in general, is going to be Joe Burrow. He's come out with the bleach blonde hair. He's bulked up. He's definitely concerned about those issues he's had with the ankle and with other parts of his body in years past. I think he wants to get rid of all that and protect himself as much as possible, especially because we all know there's going to be issues with the O-line with the Bengals. But I have them just a hair past the Ravens. I just think everywhere on the field, it's just everywhere. I mean, it's just talent and power everywhere. I think they've got enough to just sneak past.
Shane, shake it up for us. Will the title be heading anywhere other than Owings Mills, or do you have the Ravens as well? Please, throw in something different. Stir the pot.
To be honest with you, this is one of the ones I've kind of been sitting on the fence on for a bit, because every time I look at the Bengals, I think, they have Joe Burrow. He's coming back. This is their time to really push. And then I stop and think about, okay, who's he throwing the ball to? Fair enough. They still have Jamar Chase. They still have T. Higgins, but who else do they have kind of in that in that groove to really make the plays? If you have a WR1, WR2, fair enough. But in order to get past a division with the Steelers, with the Browns, with the Ravens, you need to have somebody else to throw to. And then I look at the Ravens and I think, hang on a second, they're after losing a defensive coordinator and a defensive line coach to become the head coach of the Seahawks and the defensive coordinator of the Dolphins. And as much as Lamar can run the ball and pass the ball and played an MVP caliber season last year, I'm just not quite sure that they can produce enough consistent performances in the tail end of the season in comparison to Cincinnati. We have seen consistently that Cincinnati, with Joe Burrow fit, build into a season. Doesn't really matter what their results are in the first 2, 3, 4 weeks. They build and build and build. They get a run going, and they know when to peak at the time of the year when they need to peak. And that's the reason why maybe by one game and one game only, the Bengals will get ahead of the Ravens. But it'll be an incredibly interesting division. The Steelers being gold TV from now on in, unless Russell Wilson shocks everybody and just does an excellent job, which I'm not expecting for an entire year.
I'm going to go Ravens. Brian, you're there to wrap it up. What do you think?
No one's selecting the Browns. No, it comes as a bit of a surprise. No, all things equal, I'm going to side with the Bengals this year. I think as well as the Ravens played last year, I think the question mark still remains of how competitive the Bengals would have been with Joe Burrow. They seem to be just getting their mojo back. Difficult start. I think this year it was a difficult start. And with regard to the Chiefs in week 2, it's also a big game in terms of if they could get that one over the line in terms of seeding potentially further down the line. So I'm going to go Bengals to out the Ravens as the NFC North champions this year.
Cool. Okay, we move to the AFC South. I'm going to kick it off here. The division, of course, topped by the Texans last year with that breakout season from CJ Stroud that we mentioned in passing a little bit earlier on. D'Amico Ryans, the rookie head coach, the rookie offensive coordinator. This time last year, we were saying they had an awful lot to do. We were talking about how maybe it wasn't the greatest landing spot for a promising rookie quarterback. How wrong we and a lot of other people were, and they turned out to be probably the story of the NFL last year in so many ways, to the extent where it's what everybody thinks of when they think of drafting a rookie quarterback and with the rookie head coach, and they've now set the bar for what's actually possible in year one. I'm going to, I'm going to keep it conservative here and say that they're probably going to top the division again. I'm just not seeing enough elsewhere to see that crown taken. Jags, I don't know. To me, I remain to be convinced that they're not stuck in a bit of a rut. I was very disappointed with them last year. They fell off the wagon in a big way, and were cruising at one point and looked like they were going to win the division, and they never quite got their mojo back. The Colts, I'm kind of interested to watch, and I might come back to them later on without spoiling my wildcard picks, because if they get Richardson back for a full season, if Jonathan Taylor's at full force, I think they still need to improve significantly defensively, and that's probably going to be the key to them progressing. All that and Anthony Richardson learning to run like an NFL quarterback and not like a college quarterback. You can't do what Haynes King did against Florida State University at the Aviva last week in the NFL. Anthony Richardson proved that conclusively last season. Don't lower the shoulder, because the defender's going to lower the boom, and they're bigger boys than they are in college. That's the pass to the hospital. That's the only thing that can be said there. It's Texans for me, but Brian, I'll shift it across to you.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to shift it too far. I mean, we're talking about a shift. This division has shifted quite quickly in the space of 12 months. This time last year, we were discussing a Jags team that have come off a playoff loss against the Chiefs. Things looked, you touched on there, looked like there was great expectations. You had a Titans team that were slightly in flux with Vrabel, and it kind of played out that way. But I don't think anyone was foreseeing the impact of it, of D'Amico Ryans and CJ Stroud. We did touch on last year, we felt the Texans could improve because the nature of some of the off-season moves they made, experienced players that would understand the nature of going in and trying to rebuild the team up, but probably not to the expectations of what happened. And they've only kind of doubled down on that in the off-season. As I said on earlier shows, I'm not entirely still convinced Mixon and Diggs will ultimately be the ones that bring them to where they want to be within like the AFC in terms of a championship game. But the division, I think they still have enough. I think they've built a nice team enough that they can take care of the others. The others are in flux. I think there's a surprise element to this division yet again this year, and I know we'll come to that shortly, but for me, it is the Texans as well. I think the Texans will win the division. Yep.
Kieran, what say you?
Yeah, I'm in agreement too. Like Brian said, it's shifted. That kind of window and that focus in the division has definitely shifted over to Houston. We've talked about in previous pods, we've talked about the offense and the power of the offense of the Texans, and something to really remember. And you're looking at a whole team now, not something that they just put together with little bits and pieces with the draft, but you're looking at a complete team now who I would not be surprised. And I don't want to show my hands too soon, but they're going to go deep in the playoffs. When you talk about the offense, the defense of the Texans is something that people aren't really focusing on. And you got Derek Stingley, Fatu Cassie came from the Jaguars, Will Anderson, and then that trade that free agent pickup with Daniil Hunter. I think all the pieces are in place for the Texans. All the mojo and all the flow is going their way. The only thing they got to worry about is keeping Stroud in the field, because that wide receiver room, like I've said before, is arguably the best in the league. And putting Mixon in there is definitely going to take a lot of heat off of Stroud. Keep him on the field, keep him fresh, switch him out every now and again for the run game. But I can't see anything else but Houston winning.
Cool beans. All right, Noel, what do you say?
Yeah, everything. I'm going to copy Kieran there. Everything Kieran said. I really like this Texans team. I think it's being built up the right way. I think they've done a good job at putting pieces around this young rookie quarterback who is clearly really, really talented, to give him a chance to continue that development. And I think they can go a long way in the playoffs. And the Jags, maybe some question marks. Can they get to the earlier form from last season and not kind of have that meltdown? Who knows? We'll see. They do have talent there, but I still think the Texans are probably a little bit too strong. So, yeah, I think they'll take the division.
And before we go east, Shane, finally, your division topper in the South.
Yeah, it's good to hear that everybody here is sky high in Space City. But as a Kildare man, I'm more drawn to the horseshoe. I think the Colts are going to win this division. And all the points about the Texans that have been made today are 100% perfectly valid. There are a few people who are as big a fan of CJ Stroud as I am. I just think that the pressure, all the expectation he done the Texans, all the primetime games, all the attention. You have to remember last year, the Texans were 10-7, the Colts and the Jags were 9-8. The Texans and the Colts played against each other in the last week, and that match was very close to being Colts being a 10-win team. And that's without their fresh quarterback. They have Jonathan Taylor coming in, they have Pittman Jr. on the wing, and they have Anthony Richardson coming back at quarterback. They're playing a lot of 6 o'clock games, the same as the Texans were last year. In the same way the Texans managed to, I guess, surprise people, I think the Colts will be able to surprise people this year.
All right, we move to the AFC East, and Kieran, the home of your favorite New York Jets, who I'm sure you're going to pick to go the whole way this year.
In a shock, I've actually picked. No, I haven't. No, I'm going to go with the Dolphins this year. I'm going to have the Dolphins top the division. I mean, we saw last year, and we've seen in previous years, they're kind of building towards that. They're kind of the regular season champions. That's that offense that, we don't need to talk about it. We all know about Tyreek, and we all know about Tua and Jalen Waddle. I think the only question mark in my mind is that defense. The O-line has got some questions too, but the biggest question is, can they get enough of a record? Can they stay out of the cold weather games? Because they haven't won a playoff game since December 23rd, 2000, when they beat the Colts in overtime. That is an eternity ago. But can they stay in Miami? Can they stay in warm weather? Can they luck out of going to somewhere like Kansas City or even Baltimore in January, where it's going to be anywhere from 0 to 20? So that's the real question. But I think Tua got paid. Tyreek is just Tyreek is Tyreek. And having Devon Achane back, who missed a big chunk of last year, is going to be a big help for him too. I think that I think they're going to have just a bit too much for the Bills. I can see them winning that by probably a game and a half. And I'm not even. You all know my stance on the Jets. I'm not even going to entertain that one. And yeah, I got the Dolphins. I can see a 12-5 record for the Dolphins. I really can.
Shane, your Patriots teased with the idea that Drake May might actually start, but it looks like that one's been laid to rest by Gerard Mayo, who said Jacoby Brissett is going to be the man, at least for the start of the season, and they hope he can maintain the sort of form that keeps Drake May sitting for at least a year. Is that going to be enough for them to do any damage? I suspect that you're not necessarily going to pick your beloved Pats for the title here.
No, I'm not going to pick the Patriots this year. And just a quick note on that situation. Fingers crossed, maybe Drake May's first game as a Patriot will be in London. That will be quite exciting, because a lot of people got very excited, in my view, overly excited about Drake May's performance in the preseason. But that's a topic for another day. In terms of this division, when I woke up on Monday, I thought, I think the Jets can win this. In fairness, I didn't sleep very well Sunday night. I woke up on Tuesday and I thought, well, the Bills have done it every year. Why can't they do it this year? But when I woke up on Wednesday morning, and this is the version I'm sticking with this year, I think the Dolphins will win the division this year for three simple reasons, I guess. The Jets, their schedule is awful, especially in the first half of the year. There's enough to slow them down, even if Aaron Rodgers is serviceable. The Bills have lost too much talent, I think, to maintain the pace that they have in the last couple of seasons. I know dumping Ken Dorsey and putting in the new OC gave him a nice juice of life last year, and they basically just let Josh Allen do whatever they wanted, and it kind of worked. To a new season, I'm not 100% convinced that the Bills can hit. They will be playoff contenders. I don't think they will win the division. And I just think that with Tua getting the money, with Tua and Mike McDaniel working well enough, so well that Tua will go on to a podcast and have a whinge about Brian Flores, and all of the offensive talent was being put in there. That's still in there. Tyreek Hill, Waddle Beckham Jr. will be available later on to the season. Raheem Mostert is still around. Jalen Waddle is still around. They can put up a lot of scores. The tail end of the season for them it does involve a lot of road games in cold weather cities, but I think they'll build up enough steam early on to top this division.
Like yourself, Shane, I had slightly sleepless nights this week, and I was thinking back to this time last year when I had that kind of weird feeling hearing the words, I think the Lions are going to win the NFC North, coming out of my mouth, because you think this goes against everything that we've seen for as long as we've been football fans, to tip a team like this to do something like that. But you know what? Turned out the Lions were good enough. And the preamble here is to me saying that I think the Jets are going to top this division. Just whatever you think about, and I've bored people on the podcast many times in the past talking about Aaron Rodgers and my dislike for the man, but you don't need vintage Aaron Rodgers. You don't need MVP Rodgers. I just think this roster is so good. I think this defense is so good. I think they have enough weapons that they're in position to win this division, provided he stays upright, and that's not necessarily a stone cold guarantee either. We can talk about that with other quarterbacks as well, and we've touched on Joe Burrow in the AFC North as another one who's risky, but also another one who, if fit, absolutely has what it takes to lead his team to the division. I think Rodgers is the same here. We only need I think 70% Aaron Rodgers is more than good enough to take the Jets to this title and to the playoffs. I would think maybe the Bills in the runner-up spot, but I think it's going to be something of a down year for the Bills. I kind of agree with a certain amount of what you guys have been saying about the Dolphins, but much though I like so much of what Mike McDaniel does, and I love the creativity in the running game, and I love the way they can mix it up on offense. And I am a bit of a Tua believer. Finally, he's kind of won me around. I think he's good enough, but I just watching what happened to them last season towards the tail end, those last couple of games, particularly the way they got manhandled by the Bills, and then just that limp playoff exit. It's very hard to get behind that in terms of them shedding their image of the glass jaw that they have. It's Jets on top of this division for me. Noel, what do you think?
See, I'm going with you on that one. Sorry, Kieran. For me, look, I like this Jets defense. I think that defense is going to be really, really strong, and it is predicated on Aaron Rodgers having, a specific type of season. Now they have kind of updated that or upgraded the offensive line a bit to give them a bit of help. Obviously, you have Garrett Wilson there. They have a good running back in Breece Hall. I think if this offense can click and Aaron Rodgers can get going, I think they probably just shade the Dolphins. I was between the two teams, but I look at those last 6 games for the Dolphins, and that is a tough run. And I think the Dolphins could start really, really strong, but those last 6 games, they could maybe, they could lose 3 or 4 of them, and they could maybe just kind of scrape in as a wild card. I think the Jets just have a good team, as I say, if Aaron Rodgers clicks.
Are we missing anyone? Brian, sorry, I nearly forgot to get your pick for the division. How rude of me.
Yeah, this is the one I wasn't supposed to say too much about, so I won't. In a New York minute, everything can change. Well, it did last year on the opening drive, but I don't foresee that this season. I am also going with the Jets. I think they built a team last year for Aaron Rodgers to come in, essentially step in and bring them to the playoffs. It didn't materialize. I think it does this year. I do think they'll win the division, but I think they'll come unstuck very quickly in the playoffs, and that will be the bigger conversation. Aaron Rodgers doesn't do it again in the postseason as opposed to the regular season. It's the Jets for me as well.
All right, that's our 4 AFC division picks complete now. We can recap on some of the main points there. And for those of you watching us live on YouTube, we'll be flashing up the banners as well, so you can see visually who's picking whom. But while we're getting the banners up on screen, just to welcome back everyone into the Irish NFL show and to the community, which is growing all the time. And you look, again, we're doing the show for you guys, and it's great to have the sort of support that we get, and brilliant to see people and familiar faces and new faces popping up here in the chat. Rory Fitzgerald, a loyal supporter, saying welcome back, lads. Only 3 screens short of a red zone vibe, because again, for those of you watching this on YouTube, some of you will be listening back on the podcast, so this won't apply. But we have the 5 boxes now. We're only a couple of boxes short of Scott Hansen's fever dream, when you have all 8 screens going at the same time. Rory also saying, I'm sure Kieran's delighted to see Louis Rees-Zammit snapped up by the Jags. That could be exciting from a special teams point of view, Kieran. We'll see. I'm sure you can get down there again to talk to LRZ as you managed to catch a word with them when the Chiefs were in town during preseason. Hopefully from his perspective, he'll be back. I think slightly rough that he got discarded by the Chiefs there. Everything seemed to be going well. They certainly seemed to be giving him plenty of pop. So it was disappointed for him to see him get cut, but good to see him back in the game, at least tentatively so, with the Jags. Right, so Kieran's divisional winners. He has the Dolphins taking the East, the Bengals as kings in the AFC North, the Texans emerging triumphant in the South, and the Chiefs repeating on their way to a three-peat in the AFC West. Brian has the Jets taking the East. He has the Bengals on top in the North. He has the Texans in the South, and again, the Chiefs in the West. I have the Jets in the East, slightly nervously so. I have the Ravens in the North, the Texans in the South, and like everyone else, I have the Chiefs in the West. Noel has the Jets in the East, the Ravens in the North, the Texans in the South, and the Chiefs like me. So that's a snap for the two of us across the board in the AFC. Shane has the Dolphins in the East like Kieran. He has the Bengals in the North. The Colts taking the South. I think you're in splendid isolation there, Shane, in having the Colts in the South and the Chiefs in the West. Right, before we move on to the NFC, it does remain for us, of course, to throw our wildcard picks into the ring. I know I'm usually happy to kind of play a cagey and bring up the rear, but for once I'll volunteer mine up front. So for wildcard picks in the AFC, I have the Bengals, the Bills, and the Colts in the wildcard spots.
There you go, Connor. Yeah, even spoiling your NFC wildcards, but unfortunately,
put a hand over one side of the screen if you're watching it on YouTube, so that the surprise isn't spoiled for you. Kieran, who have you got in the wildcard spots in the AFC?
Well, I've gone for the Bills from the East. I think despite losing a couple of prize assets like Gabe Davis and Stephon Diggs, I think this is going to be a year that Josh Allen is really going to push everything and squeeze every little drop out of what that team has. Keon Coleman, I think, is going to have a big year. And I think that defense is still going to be a force to be reckoned with, notwithstanding offensive pieces like Dalton Knox and James Cook running the ball. I also have the Jaguars just falling behind the Texans. I think they're going to, I spent a good amount of time, as I'm sure everyone knows, at practice with the Jags this summer. The defense put in a huge shift and definitely shaded it from the offense. I just think that the division itself, I think it's going to be back and forth with the Texans up until December, but I think the Texans are going to break free in that kind of week 13 area. The Jags are going to stick with it. I can see them getting a 10-7 record and just limping over the line. And then I have the Ravens, not a huge surprise in the AFC North, but I think they're going to be pipped by the Bengals when all is said and done. Ravens, smash mouth football, just dirt and mud flying, like I said earlier, but with Derrick Henry out there. I mean, we all remember what happened in the playoffs when they suddenly forgot to throw the ball or to run the ball and decided to throw the ball all over the place in the winter. And I think Derrick Henry is going to be a huge asset to them, and that's going to be a real game changer in the playoffs.
Brian, who you got for your wildcard picks?
Well, I've gone with the Ravens. So like as optimistic as I am for the Bengals to rebound and win the division, I still think the Ravens essentially are going to be one of the teams a leading light going into playoffs, whether they're divisional winners or wildcard. I haven't been a wildcard. I think the Dolphins, I'm picking the Jets, but I'm not entirely, I'm not going with 100% conviction. I think the Dolphins are in for a good season again. But unfortunately, the Dolphins, and it's to Kieran's point earlier, unless they're, galvanizing themselves in a home game come January, it's just not going to be good enough for them, and they'll find their way out of the playoffs very quickly because they'll go on the road as a wildcard team. And this is probably the fourth shock of the night. I'm sure there was other one, or maybe it's not, because Shane has gone with the Colts to win the South, but I'm going back into the South, but I have the Tennessee Titans making the playoffs. I really like what they've done in the off season. And I think a lot of other people, it's starting to gather pace in terms of other people starting to suggest this team are a dark horse. I've been saying it for months that they've done a great job, both offensively, defensively. The new coach reminds me of a coach that will come in with little expectations, i.e. last year in the division, such as the Colts and a new head coach and the Texans. And I have the Titans ousting everybody and getting to the playoffs with nobody expects.
All right, Brian's little Bitcoin Titans craze is starting to gather momentum. Shane, your wildcard picks, please.
Yeah, I've quite simply gone for the teams I think will be the second best teams in the three best divisions, which that discounts the AFC West. I'm sorry, fans of the Raiders, Chargers, and Broncos. So I have picked the Ravens, the Bills, and the Texans all to make the playoffs. I think the Ravens, are exceptionally strong. It'll be a tough race for them to win the division, and they will probably be the fifth seed, I think. The Texans, as was sort of explained by everybody else earlier, are a very good team with very high expectations. I think they will have more than the Jaguars over the course of the season, which means that they will put them in a better place to get the wildcard spots. So the biggest question to me is the Bills. And the Bills have more than the Jets. And I am saying that knowing full well that I've never had to share a division with Aaron Rodgers, unlike yourself, Connor, and yourself, Noel, who picked the Jets to win that division. I can understand your point of view in those selections. But I just think that for me, it's between the Bills and the Jaguars to get that final wildcard spot. I think the Bills will probably just get a couple of more wins throughout the season to lock in that final spot.
Noel, you are the one who gets to complete the bingo card before we move to the NFC. The three remaining wildcard spots for you.
Me, I'm going to go with the Bengals first, because I think in that NFC or AFC North, it's going to be nip and tuck between them and the Ravens. And I think they're going to be a strong team. Obviously, you have Joe Burrow there. I think they'll be able to win enough games to get into the wild card spot. I then have the Dolphins coming in, as I was kind of alluding to earlier. I think they're going to start really well. I think they will challenge the Jets for the division, similar to Brian. I'm not 100% solid on it, but I'm just kind of thinking that's the way it'll go. But I think they'll just have a tough run in for those last 6 games where it could derail them in terms of winning the division, but they'll have done enough to get into the wild card spot. And finally, I'm going to go with the Bills. And I was back and forth on this one because there has been so much change there. But look, when you look at Josh Allen at quarterback, I think his wide receivers are adequate. I think a quarterback like him can get that little bit more out of them. And I think they'll be able to just do enough to sneak in there at the end.
All right, this is the Irish NFL Show's 2024-25 divisional preview show. Welcome back again to everyone who's watching us live on YouTube. If you're listening back to the podcast, you're now listening to the NFC divisional picks. You can check out the AFC preview on wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're if you already listened to the AFC, then welcome to our NFC divisional picks. And we start with the NFC West. Noel, we go to you first in the division that sent the conference champion San Francisco 49ers on their way to a Super Bowl, which of course they lost in overtime at Allegiant Stadium in February. Do they repeat, or will there be a new challenger emerging from the NFC West?
No, for me, the 49ers is going to repeat. I think this team is stacked on both sides of the ball. They obviously have a head coach who can work wonders out there in the field as well, with scheming things up. I just think the 49ers are so strong. You look at McCaffrey there. I know there's a lot going on with Brandon Ayuk. I think no matter whether he goes or stays, I still think this team is just too good. It'll be tough though. I think the Rams are on for a good season this year. I think Matthew Stafford could look really good. Obviously, Puka Nacua came out of nowhere last season and surprised everyone. They lose Aaron Donald, which can be a big loss, but obviously they go out and they get Jared Verse and Braden Fisk in the draft. So maybe those guys could come in and kind of plug a hole. We look to the Seattle Seahawks, who are going to be interesting. I'm not the biggest Geno Smith fan in the world. I think he can be a bit hit and miss. So for me, I'll kind of watch how he does. Obviously, they have a new head coach in there, so that's kind of maybe take a little time to see how everything develops. They had a Pete Carroll there for such a long time. It'll just be interesting to see how the team now moves on with a much younger head coach coming in. And then I think the final team will be the Cardinals, who actually I think could look pretty good this year. I know they won 4 games last season, but they have a very interesting looking offense, which could be really exciting to watch. I think they've made a few moves on defense because they had a terrible defense last year, which could maybe just shore it up a bit. But overall, I just think the San Francisco 49ers will be too strong. They've too much going into this division.
Kieran, a lot of people were surprised, and Noel touched on it briefly there, at the emergence or re-emergence of the Rams last year and how quickly they managed to rebuild. Obviously, they hit on some draft picks. Looks like they've addressed a couple of areas of need with Aaron Donald's departure, as Noel said, with the 2 FSU players coming in there, Braden Fisk and Jared Verse. Massively fortunate, I suppose, but also credit to their scouting in Puka Nacua being probably the breakout draft pick from an offensive perspective last year as a fifth round receiver rather. Is that enough to put them over the top and challenge the 49ers? Do you see somebody emerging from elsewhere, or is it going to be San Francisco on top again?
No, I think I would love if the Rams pushed them all the way to the end, but it all comes down to horses in the end. I think San Francisco is just stacked top to bottom. They've just got too much in that division. It's at the stage now with Shanahan where it's almost like win or we're gonna have to try something else, because they've been that close the last probably 5 years, and even before that, with Harbaugh they got so close. But with Shanahan now, it's pretty much win or we may have to go a different direction, because you can't get that close every single year and not get to the finish line. Everything is lined up, even like Noel said with the
you can if you're Mike Shanahan or Andy Reid. Those are the 2 comparisons the poor old Kyle Shanahan keeps getting thrown at him, which means he has about 20 more years before he finally gets over the line.
He's got that hanging over his head. But even with the Ayuk's mini drama that's going on, you look around the field. I mean, it's loaded everywhere. The one spot where you could say it's not loaded is quarterback, and that's the big decision that San Francisco is going to have. Not this season, but something going forward. I'm on record saying that I don't believe in Purdy. I don't think he's not even an elite quarterback. I don't think he's a top 10 quarterback in the league. He just lucked into a situation where he was surrounded by absolute beasts. But it's going to be a situation where the Niners are. I don't want to say going to stroll through the division, because I do know the Rams are going to keep pace with them up until December. But it's to all intents and purposes, it's looking like another 11-6, 12-5 season for San Francisco out west.
And as we head into the 2024-2025 season, the Brock for President fan club can go after Kieran now. He's now taken on the mantle from Colm of the the leader of the Brock is a Croc brigade. All right, Shane, you're picking the West.
Yeah, I think it's the 49ers division to lose. I think they're going to have enough to do. The question with the 49ers is, can they get the number 1 overall seed, which would be maybe a little bit more difficult for them this year than it was previously, just because those 6 individual games against divisional opponents will be a little bit trickier than they were previously. I think the Rams and the Cardinals have all taken a step up, and I'm not quite sure what to expect from the Seahawks. So in terms of matchups and being able to build an overall record to challenge for the top seed, that's where the 49ers race is. They're not looking, I don't think they're looking too far or looking too much over their shoulder at what the Rams are doing. As good as the Rams are, as much as I highly rate their coaching, as much as I think they've got a very good squad, I don't think they're good enough to top this 49ers in this division, because it's quite simple. The 49ers Super Bowl window is not only open, it's being blown out of the wall. They have to do it now. So they have the team, they have the quarterback situation, which is sort of worked in their favor. I hope that Brandon Ayuk stays from their point of view, because I think he's a good enough player to help them get it over the line in one or two of those key matchups. So, for them, it's, everything's there. Just do it.
Yeah, I will say briefly for my part, I think this is one of the more intriguing divisions. Actually, it's gotten a little bit more interesting. Looking carefully to see what the Seahawks will be like under the new leadership there with Pete Carroll now gone. Will they get it right in the defensive side of the ball? Will we see the Geno of 2 years ago, or will that prove to have been a little bit of a mercurial flash? Cardinals, I'm interested in watching. Can't wait to see what Marvin Harrison Jr. does with Kyler Murray there. I think whatever way that one goes, that's going to be spicy. And I think with the Rams and the 49ers duking out at the top, it is going to be one of the more intriguing divisions. I do, however, see the 49ers coming out on top. Brian?
I spoke to John Chapman this week from the 49ers Rush podcast, and there's a very different mindset going into this season. Albeit, he said it was very familiar to last year. They go to the championship game. They have injuries, which derails an opportunity to win in Philadelphia. And essentially, they needed to run it back. And they did run it back, and they went one step forward. But he did note that the Trent Williams contract not being resolved and the Brandon Ayuk piece is, in particular in the Bay Area, is taking up such scrutiny on the media and on the airwaves that essentially no one's even talking about the fact that this team has such high expectations. They're all very disgruntled with Brandon Ayuk. He doesn't seem to know essentially what he wants. He doesn't want to go here. He doesn't want to go there. He doesn't want to take the money after suggesting he needs the money. If they can avoid all the distractions, this team should be certainly winning the division. And again, being very much in the focus come January to be going to the Super Bowl. But again, sometimes these type of situations kind of play silly buggers to teams and they don't find the way. I think Kieran, by the way, has given us our first kind of cannonball or fireball, pitbull moment of the season. We could use that potential song on a TikTok video around his suggesting that Brock Purdy isn't a top 10 quarterback. I think that's doing a disservice to the guy. I think he's well capable of going and playing for any other team and being successful. But he's in a good position there, and I think they should be challenging for the Super Bowl, definitely winning the division.
All right, we move on to the NFC North, and Noel, last year Lions were probably the feel-good story, as we've talked about, of the NFL last year, going all the way to the playoffs, coming within a hair's breadth really of making it to the Super Bowl, never mind just getting to the playoffs. And they want to go one step better, but to do so, the cleanest path would be to take the North. Will they do it?
Yes, I think they will. I think they've built this team up so well over the last number of years. We obviously saw how close they got last season. A second half collapse is where they were, how close they were to a Super Bowl. I mean, you look at this offense, and it's so good at running back. They're sorted. They have Amon-Ra St. Brown at wide receiver. Sam Laporta is excellent tight end there. So on offense, they have all the pieces there. On defense, they had some issues at cornerback, which they went out and they addressed big time in free agency and in the actual draft itself. Then you have Jack Campbell, Aiden Hutchinson there. I just think this team has been built up really, really well over a number of years, and it's starting to come together. And I think they're probably going to be too strong. I think that their next kind of rivals will be the Packers. But I still have issues, or not issues, I have questions over the Packers. It's a very young offense. I don't think the quarterback is there. I think a lot of people are saying he's there. I think he's had half a season where he was really good and half a season where it kind of was coming together. So for me, it's still a question that has to be answered. Now, it ended really well for the Packers, and they have every right to be positive about it. But I just want to wait and see if that kind of growth continues. Again, the wide receivers look very good, but I want to see that growth continue. So that's kind of my questions with them. Then look, I have the Bears. I think the Bears definitely look like they're going in the right direction. but we've a rookie quarterback, and I'm just going to say that the rookie quarterback might be the reason I'll have them kind of drop back a bit, because as good as I think he can be, I think there's still going to be growing pains, which is just natural for any rookie quarterback coming into the league. And then, look, the Vikings got so unlucky with a couple of injuries, especially with their rookie quarterback. I think they probably are the number 4 team in the division, but I think it's a strong division. And it wouldn't surprise me if the Bears went ahead of the Packers, or the Packers went ahead of the Lions. But I just think it'll play out that the Lions will be too strong. The Pack might be behind them, then the Bears and the Vikings.
Kieran, I will happily admit that this was the worst and most boring division in the NFL about 3 or 4 years ago, and now it's actually arguably one of the most interesting. But which way do you think it's going to pan out?
Well, at the risk of upsetting the Bears crew on the panel, I'm not sold on the Bears, and I'm not sold on Caleb Williams. I got a lot of question marks. A lot of questions about him coming up this season. There's going to be
he's not sold on any quarterback. There's
going to be some tabloid stuff with Caleb Williams, and there's going to be some sideline stuff that I'm guaranteeing is going to come out. But anyway, no, I think the Bears will be good, but it's too soon. It's again they loaded up in the draft. They lucked out getting the Dunze as well at 9, I think it was. The Packers I'm not sold on. Like Noel said, I think the Jordan Love fest has been overhyped. It's like Jets hype. It's ridiculous. I mean, he bowled out and he had a good half of a season, but that was it's too small of a sample size. And like Noel said, I'm not sold on the offensive weapons they have. But I think there's still a lot of question marks about Romeo Dobbs, whatever his name is. And I think it's going to be a good season for them. It's going to be an improvement on last year, but I've got the Lions winning. I love Dan Campbell. I love Detroit. I love the grit. I love the shade of blue on the jersey. I just love everything about Detroit right now. The law firm of Gibbs and Montgomery are just going to run up and down the field. And I think it's between, even unheralded players like Alex Anzalone, the linebacker. Everyone talks about Hutchinson, but Anzalone is an absolute monster back there too. It was almost a heartbreaker. I don't think anyone has got a big draw or a love for the Lions, but it was almost heartbreaking when the Niners picked them off in the playoffs. Everybody was rooting for Detroit. I think somebody put out an Axel Foley kind of mood in Detroit, kind of meme at the time. But I think everyone's rooting for Detroit this year. I think they're gonna go a little bit farther. Without tipping my hat for the Super Bowl picks, I've got a really good feeling about Detroit this year. But they're going to win the division and then some.
Yeah, I got to say, I'm with you there. I love the Honolulu Blue. I love what Brad Holmes and the crew did in the draft. They did what I thought was the sensible thing, what everybody thought they should do. This is kind of the Howie Roseman thing. People think Howie Roseman is a genius, but I think there's a sense that he just does the common sense thing at the right time, addresses the area that he needs to address. That's what the Lions did. The secondary was the one area where you thought they needed a bit of reinforcement. They've done precisely that. They've picked 2 guys that I think can, at least one of whom will slot straight in there. They got the receivers. Jared Goff, as Dan Campbell memorably said, is good enough for Detroit. He was damn near good enough to get them the whole way to the Super Bowl last year. I think they reload and they come back. They don't strike me as a team that is going to be anything like hungover or fall off after having gotten to the championship game and fallen short. Like you, I'm not going to spoil my Super Bowl pick here on, so I might just leave it there for the time being. But looking elsewhere in the division, there's an argument, if everybody does what they're supposed to do, that this division could actually send 3 teams to the playoffs. I don't think that's quite what's going to happen. I do think the Packers will just about get back there. Like you, Kieran, I'm slightly, having reflected last season, wondering, have we seen enough of a sample size of Jordan Love to really anoint him as a top 10 quarterback in the NFL? He looked like it when he looked like it, but he didn't when he didn't. I don't think you can have it both ways. I don't think you can say, well, he was able to slot in straight away because he had all those years sitting and learning behind Aaron Rodgers, and then watch what he did over the first few games and not think, still a little few question marks there. And that might be unfair, but that's only because it's a relatively small sample of games. We'll see how they go this year, but all the talent is there, to be fair. LaFleur is an excellent coach. We've talked about him at length on the show in the past, and that does make a big difference to them. I think that's the X factor for them. I think they'll go back to the playoffs as well, but I do think the Lions will take the division. Shane, your division winner.
Yeah, I'll be brief, and I probably won't spend too much time explaining my view. I think the Bears can do it. I think the Packers will do it, and I think the Packers will top the division. I think the Lions won't do it. I'll keep that short and sweet.
Brian, Shane broke the tie. Have you got something interesting to say?
I do, yeah. I'm with Shane on this. I think it's the year for the Packers to rebound, and I keep coming back to that game in January where we spoke even last Saturday night over a point. In fact, Connor, where you said the Lions aren't in that championship game if it wasn't for Dan Campbell rolling the dice. Yeah, but it's situational football, and they may not ever be back again with an opportunity to go to the Super Bowl, and we have to live and learn that maybe the right thing to do is take field goals. I think they've lost their opportunity. I think
the Lions didn't get to the Super Bowl because a ball rebounded off a guy's freaking face mask. Like, let's not overweight on Dan Campbell being Dan Campbell.
Giants don't win a Super Bowl unless David Tyree catches a ball and hangs on to the back of someone's helmet. These things happen in playoff football. That's why we love it so much, Connor. Look, I think we saw enough out of Packers in the second half of last season to understand that they were gradually getting up to a new period with a new quarterback and transitioning, to acknowledging what he can do on the field. And like, let's bear in mind, it was his first year properly playing in the league. So of course it's going to take him time to get up to speed. But when he did, we saw the real merits as to why they've held on to him and why they kept him for the 3 or 4 years in the background to transition into the quarterback. And I think they're going to kick off the season really strong. And I think they're going to put them in a much better position. And I think they're bearing in mind that they beat the Lions last year. They beat the Lions on Thanksgiving Day in Detroit. And then they went into the playoffs, and if things had went their way, they could be playing in the championship game. I think they're primed for a big season, and I think they're ready to take the division again. I'm going to go with the Packers. Not necessarily saying the Lions won't have a successful season, but it's the Packers for me as well.
All right, you stay in the spotlight, Brian, because we come to you to kick off our preview of the NFC South. This one is a toss-up, or has been for the last couple of years. It's who gets to 7-10 first. Usually is the way that decides it. Will it be different this year? And if so, who's going to take it?
It will be this year. It will be this year because there was actually teams winning records at the end of last season who didn't make the playoffs. I mean, everyone assumes it's the Bucs. The Bucs are going to run it back because the Bucs have been winning a difficult division over the course of the last few years. And we, even in March, April, people were suggesting the Bucs they've won the off season because they maintained Baker Mayfield and Mike Evans. But there was parts of last season where the Bucs didn't look at the level in which they were towards the end of the season. The Falcons continue to have everybody scratching their heads. They've got all the players in the world to have a quality team, but they find ways to lose games, and then they find ways to win games when you don't expect it. And I think that's what we're going to see again from this team this year. I do think they're in a position to probably make a better push this year because of the nature of the quarterback. And I'm going to come back to my beloved old Saints, Connor, because I saw something interesting today. If you didn't know who the team was and you said worst offensive line in the league, didn't have a running back last year that went for 80 yards or more in a game, and didn't score on the opening drive for 16 of the 17 games, you would assume they'd only win 3 or 4 games, when in fact they won 9 games last year. I think Derek Carr is going to have a rebound season. I think the offensive line will get resolved. And I think they're a dark horse for the division, and I'm going to put my neck on the line again this year and go for the Saints to win the division.
Double down. He doubles down. Shane.
Last year, I thought the Saints would top the division this year at all. I mean, for me, when I look at this division, the Buccaneers have never played exceptional, but I've always found a way to top it. Last year, the tail end of the last season, they really built into it, so they are really the team to beat. But I think the Falcons are gonna win this division. I think there's enough, despite all the chaos that happened in the offseason, there's enough that's kind of coming in for them, right? I think. Firstly, I think Penix has maybe given them or done the team a favor in that he's not played well enough to really start a quarterback controversy before Kirk Cousins gets onto the field. I was talking to D. Orlando Ledbetter during the week. Podcast went out this morning. He's a Falcons beat writer from Atlanta. He basically just does explain that Penix isn't ready for the National Football League, so he's kind of done him a favor there. It's all on Kirk Cousins. We know that Kirk Cousins is a way, way, way better quarterback in talent than anything Atlanta had last year. Secondly, you look at what's around them. You think of the excellence in the running game that they can bring, the Drake London and the other wide receivers that they can throw to. I think they can really build a head of steam in a division where 10 wins will do it. Because there are 2 teams at 9 wins last year, the Bucs and the Saints. The Bucs topped the division. The Saints didn't make the playoffs. 10 wins is all you need to win this division. So I think the Saints have enough. And the biggest thing as well, they really need to improve in the pass rush. They got and their ability to make defensive tackles. They brought in Matthew Judon. What a great and maybe I'm slightly biased sitting here, but that's a great acquisition. That's exactly the kind of person that Atlanta needed. It might take Raheem Morris a couple of games 3 or 4 weeks to really settle into the new system. A lot has changed. They bring a lot of staff from the Rams over to Atlanta to try and build up this team. But I really think there's enough behind him for them to go and win this division.
Maybe it's because I was listening to your interview with the Orlando Ledbetter as well, but I'm going Falcons as well. I think it makes sense, and I'm always slightly nervous about tipping a team when there's been that much change. But there needed to be change. One of the factoids I picked up from Aaron Schatz's FTN almanac this year was that the Falcons played 11 personnel more often than any other team in the league. Sorry, less often than any other team in the league last year. They had 3 or 4 wide receivers sets less than any other team in the league. And that's crazy for a team in the modern NFL. Goes to show how kind of reductive Arthur Smith's offense had become, and how he'd sort of second and third and fourth guessed themselves out of just giving his team the best chance possible to win. I think, like you, Shane, that Kirk Cousins can do the point guard thing with the talent he has available and get that thing humming. They've got one of the more consistent and one of the better and one of the more underrated offensive lines in the league. I think everything over that side of the ball is going to be fine. I think what could potentially hold them back, or what could have potentially held them back, was that they were losing a lot of production and having Bud Dupree and Calais Campbell out of the building, who were their chief pass rushing threat last year. My fears in that department were largely assuaged, though, or partially assuaged at least, by the Judon pickup that you mentioned. I think Justin Simmons is another excellent acquisition. I think they've done a lot of good work in the offseason. I think there are reasons why it made sense to draft Penix. I don't think I would have used that pick. I don't think that was necessarily the smart thing to do, and I think they'd be in better shape if they'd selected one of the better defensive players who was still on the board at that point. But overall, I think, to your point, Shane, you don't need to beat the best in the conference to get out of this division. You only need to beat what's around you. I don't think that you're necessarily going to see the same version of the Bucs that you saw last year. I think I actually would agree with you, Brian. I think the Saints might be marginally better, but I don't think it's quite going to be enough to top the Falcons, who I see as the class of this division. Noel, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm with yourself and Shane. I think the Falcons will win this division. I think Kirk Cousins, as long as he comes back fit from this injury and he looks good when he actually takes the field in a regular season game, I think he could really help Drake London and Darnell Mooney. And Kyle Pitts has never really hit the heights. You know, this is maybe a quarterback who could kind of help bring that out of him. They've obviously a very good running game there with Robinson. The defense did worry me, and that was kind of a question mark to me. But the Judon move obviously allays a big chunk of that fear. But again, it goes back to the division. They're not going to need to win as many games as most other divisions to take it. And I think they'll just be good enough on offense to win enough games to get over the line. So, yes, it's the Falcons for me.
And Kieran, before we go to you in the East, who's your pick for the South?
This is a brutal division. This is a really, really bad division. There's not a lot I can see. I've heard all the stuff about the Saints. I don't believe in the Saints, period. I think they're a bad team. I think Derek Carr is one of the worst quarterbacks in the league. I think the first drop back in the first game of the season is going to be an incompletion, and the fans are going to give him the business. Dennis Allen will be the first head coach fired. Derek Carr is going to be benched probably by game 4 or game 5 and be run out of town. Saints do not like Derek Carr. The fans do not like him. Panthers are miles away from doing anything productive, even with some of the changes they've made. And the Falcons are the Jets of the NFC. They're just I don't know what the Kirk Cousin love in. Terry Fontenot, he's going to get fired too for drafting another quarterback.
The Falcons are the Jets of the NFC. Can I introduce you to the Carolina Panthers?
Well, the Falcons get a lot of press, and they always seem to get the media on their side, and then end up with an 8-9 season or a 7-10 season. I don't believe in the Falcons. I think it's going to be another season of the same old stuff for the Falcons. I know they've upgraded on the quarterback position, and they've got some so-so players on offense, Drake London and Kyle Pitts, who haven't really hit the heights yet. I'm going with the Buccaneers purely because it's the best of a bad bunch. I think it's going to be a 9-8 win, and that's going to get them over the line. I just think there's just poor teams there. And, thank God for the NFL Sunday Ticket or even the Red Zone, because otherwise I'd be stuck watching the Carolina Panthers and Atlanta Falcons down here in the South, because that's a poor thing to look forward to on a Sunday. So thank God for Mr. Hansen with the network. I'm going with the Buccaneers. Baker's got just enough. They've got just enough weapons with Godwin and Rachaad White running the ball. But oh man, It's going to be tough sledding. Tough sled.
All right, don't go anywhere, Kieran, because you're starting us off on the NFC East, where we'll finally see, are there any quarterbacks you actually like? Surely you've got a bit of Dak Prescott love.
Well, I mean, there's been a lot of talk about Dak, being surplus to requirements in Dallas come next season when they have to pay him upwards of $60 million. I'm not a huge proponent of Dak. I think he's good enough for what's given to him. Jerry gives him just enough weapons. But the thing with the Cowboys this year is, that's a bad running back room. Rico Dowdle and Zeke Elliott, that's your answer. And then there's a huge drop off in creativity and in talent after CeeDee Lamb and Brandon Cooks. I'm not sold on it being a big year in Dallas, which is strange to say because usually they're a perennial, favorites. But the Giants, we've talked in length about them, and it could go either way. It could be a 3-14 or it could be a 10-7. It all depends if Daniel Jones stays healthy. Washington, that's another work in progress. I'm on record saying Jaden Daniels is not ready for the league just yet, even with the talent that's around him. He's undersized. He's going to have to bulk up a huge amount in the next year or two. But with the Eagles, I can't see anybody else in the Eagles. They've upgraded on the one spot they needed to, which was running back last year, despite the question marks about Saquon's health. And the one thing to look out for with Jalen Hurts, that's the other question mark. The teams have figured out that if you run zero blitz, he just gets spooked and he doesn't know what to do. But I think Barkley's going to be a huge safety blanket for him because once he started throwing last year, that's when all the problems happened. Giving it off to Barkley 20, 30 times a game is going to be a big help for him. I think, and again, it all comes down. It's like the 49ers. It's just talent everywhere. It's, Devonta Smith. We don't need to reel off the names. We all know where the talent is. And the two spots, again, like we discussed, that they got smoked on in the regular season in December and even in the playoffs, they addressed in the draft with the two draft picks. Who was I forget the name, Quinyon Mitchell,
Cooper DeJean,
just DeJean Cooper, and they've upgraded in all the positions. The only question mark is Sirianni. There's a lot of talk about Sirianni and Hurts relationship, and is it deteriorating? Is that going to be enough of a factor to derail the season? But again, it comes down to talent, and they're just loaded everywhere. And with Saquon back there, if he stays reasonably healthy, if he gives them 70% of a season, then that's going to be enough to get it past the line. So I'm going to Eagles.
Brian, as Kieran was saying, it could go either way for the Giants. It was intriguing, though, to see them unretire Ray Flaherty's jersey for Malik Neighbours. That just goes to show you the sort of value that they place in him. If he is the player that the Giants believe he can be, and if he's worth that honour, that could be very intriguing. Is that enough to take the division?
No, absolutely not. I don't think the Giants will be in the sweepstakes for this division. I like the way you tee that up, Conor, but I think the harsh reality for Giants fans is I think we're going to be in that. I think we might be in the Dak Prescott sweepstakes next year because we might find ourselves doing just enough to win so many games that we just aren't in the pecking order for the quarterback come April 2025 when we roll around from another draft. But let's not get too carried away with that. We've got a season ahead of us. I think there is a good opportunity for the Giants this year. People are underestimating it, but ultimately I think it's going to come down to the very first 2 weeks of the season. And it's strange I might say that, but Sam Darnold week 1 and Jaden Daniels week 2. I mean, realistically, you look at quarterbacks you're playing in the league and you need to get over the line against these type of quarterbacks with all due respect to them. If the Giants find themselves 0-2, the pressure is already on Joe Shane. Joe Shane was very snappy at the press conference yesterday. It wasn't a contractually obliged press conference, so I was surprised he even went to the trouble of doing it, but he was snapping at a lot of reporters. To me, it looks like he's already kind of feeling the pressure and expectations of what John Mara said recently, which is he expects a better season. He should expect a better season. In terms of the division itself, I'm going to stick with the Cowboys. I think whilst they didn't do a lot in the offseason, I don't think necessarily they have to. I think I kind of would disagree with Kieran Sly. I think they've got enough offensively to really put up an average of 30 points per game. Like, yeah, the running back room is a concern, and they brought in Dalvin Cook this week, which this time last year everybody felt the Jets had pulled off a mass stroke and bring him in, but it looked like he was on the wrong side of his career after his departure from the Vikings. But I think offensively still got enough. I think defensively they got playmakers. It is a concern that they've lost Bland, the cornerback, for 6 weeks, but the Cowboys last year took hold of so many games defensively, and I see that the same this year. For me, the Sirianni conversation hasn't gone away. How has it gone away? Like, they lose a playoff game. It looks like it's a disgruntled camp. Nobody wants to play for him. What's turned around in 6 months that all of a sudden everything is at an equal footing again? Like, they haven't played a game. They hadn't had the players really back together since July. It'll be interesting to see if they don't get off to a fast start. you know what the Philadelphia Eagles fans are like. There'll be an adverse reaction. And does the pressure mount on him? And does it I'm not entirely convinced the GM is also in lockstep with the head coach. So that's one to watch, and I think that could potentially could be what derails the Eagles season, the pressure on the head coach if they don't get off to a fast start. And Vic Fangio is a head coach in waiting in terms of an interim head coach, not necessarily a long-term head coach, but they have somebody, including Kellen Moore, that could potentially step in if he was to lose his job. But I'm sure Eagles fans will think I'm barking up the wrong tree, but I think there's an undercurrent there that hasn't been resolved, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that the Sirianni storyline is going to be fascinating to watch. But I have to say, there was no Sirianni storyline when they were sleepwalking their way to 10 wins last year. They were absolutely running through teams like a knife through butter for the first part of the schedule. Agreed, it was disturbing to watch how they just precipitously fell off a cliff. And when we saw some teams collapse later on in the season, we talked about the Jaguars early and how they combusted. But the Eagles was just a spectacular blow for such a talented team. But I still can't get away from the fact that they are such a talented team. They got, as Kieran said, the best players in every position that really matters. Yeah, there are question marks to a certain extent over whether people have figured out Jalen Hurts, but I think he's got so many players to get the ball to, and Saquon probably for me is the missing piece to give him the sort of insurance that he's going to need to keep him where he needs to be to get the Eagles rolling. I think defensively they're going to be much better off than they were last year. They addressed what they needed to. They got the two guys in the draft who they should have been looking to get to plug the gaps in their secondary. And I just look around them and I think Giants probably not going to have enough. I'm interested to watch them this year and see what happens with Jones back and hopefully fully fit. I'm very excited to watch Malik Neighbors and very excited to watch that Giants defense, which just got even better. And Brian Burns is a superb acquisition there. I think they're going to be terrifying as they were last season, but even more so this year. Probably the most underrated defensive unit in the NFL, in my opinion, last year. Defense really at times can only be as good as the offense lets you, with given your field position and the circumstance you're going to be put in. I think the Giants are going to be in a better position this year, and who knows, they may. I won't spoil my wildcard picks, but they may win enough games to be in the conversation. I don't think they're going to win enough games to win the division. I just think the Cowboys, it's, plan B is plan A harder. They just keep doing the same thing every year. Don't make any major acquisitions. Don't address the areas that you really should be addressing, and just hope that things are going to be 5 or 10% better out of nowhere. That's just not a formula for me. They've consistently squeezed out the double-digit wins, in fairness to them, kind of like the Bills on the other side of the draw, and then consistently failed to build on that. I don't see them having done enough. I think you're going to find that the Cowboys hit that point where you're at your peak, and then a year later, you're a year past your peak. And I think that's where they are now. They haven't done enough, and I don't think they're going to win the division. I think it's Phillies all day long for me. Shane, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of those points. I'm not quite sure what to make of the Giants. I don't think they have enough in them to win the division. Can they make the playoffs? We really have to see how well Daniel Jones plays. We haven't really seen him on the field. We're not quite sure what to expect. I think with the Cowboys, it's a simple case of they've done so much dicking around in the front office that they actually cannot get their front foot. They cannot get on their front foot on the field. And this whole cycle, it's always the cycle of we them boys. Oh no, wait, something's gone wrong, or something's going to go right again. Something goes wrong again. It's just going to keep turning and turning and turning. So I think they will have a lot of games where they will turn heads. They will have a lot of games that will build excitement, but they will have a lot of games when they are crushingly disappointing. With the Eagles, though, I think the Eagles are going to win the division for the simple fact that they're not going to rely on the tush push or the brotherly shove as much this year. And they're going to force themselves to have to play football. And they're going to remind themselves that they're actually pretty good at it. So for that reason, the fact that they are by far the most talented squad in the division, I think the Eagles are going to top the East.
Noel, before we reveal all our wildcard picks, who do you think is going to take the East?
Yeah, just what Shane there. For me, the Eagles are just the most talented team in this division. And I think they made a great move bringing Barkley in. Brian touched on the defensive coordinators earlier, or the coordinators earlier on. Now, whether they'll become a story, if there's any issue with Sirianni, could they become a distraction? I don't think they will. I think they've upgraded at defensive and offensive coordinator spots. I think they have enough good players in there that they can take this division. I don't really see them having too much trouble. The Cowboys, I think, may start to regress a bit. As you say, they've just become a bit stagnated. I don't really know what they're doing going forward. And then I still think the Commanders and the Giants, for me, still need a bit of time to get these rosters built up before they can challenge, certainly for this season anyway. So yeah, for me, I just see the Eagles take it.
Good stuff, Brian. I know you're impressively double jobbing here. For anybody watching YouTube live, Brian also doubles as the graphics producer and has to flash up the banners on the screen. We're getting to our wildcard picks now, so why don't we start with yours? If you can throw them up there for anyone watching live. Obviously, not something you're going to be enjoying if you're listening back to us on podcast, but I can tell you the visuals are only spectacular here. Brian, you have the Lions, Eagles, and Falcons in the wildcard spots in the NFC.
Yeah, I touched on it earlier. I think the Eagles can flatter to deceive, the Falcons can flatter to deceive, but I still think there's enough there this season that they can, with Kirk Cousins there, they can have a bit more of a stabilized season and do enough to make the playoffs. The Eagles, like again, I said I'm quite high in the Cowboys. I don't like I think we're all been doing a disservice to the Cowboys in terms of, like, but let's bear in mind they went to the divisional round last year and they were heavy favourites going into that game and they got exposed greatly. But over the course of the season, they didn't get exposed in too many games. And I think they're worthy of winning the division again. But I do have the Eagles making the playoffs, despite my concern on Sirianni. And as a touchdown, I think the Packers are primed for a bounce back year in terms of retaining the NFC North division again. So they're my three, and obviously we touched on it earlier: Ravens, Dolphins, and my surprise factor being Will Levis and the Titans to make the playoffs, which is on the graphic as we speak.
All right, Kieran, we get to your wildcard picks, and we saw your AFC ones earlier on, but just to complete the picture, you have the Cowboys, you have the Rams, and you have the Packers in the wildcard slots in the NFC.
Yeah, as I said earlier, the Cowboys, they're going to have enough in the division just purely on what they have, and probably the Giants and definitely Washington not having enough. I like the Rams. I think the two pickups they had, Verse and Fisk, was going to be a big help with that kind of Aaron Donald replacement. And we know about Puka and all the skill and what they bring on the offense. And with Green Bay, it's too soon yet. I haven't seen enough, but I think the talent is there, despite the fact that the Bears are kind of barking at their heels. I think they're going to have enough to pick that wild card spot up in that. Not just in the division, in the conference. And then, like I said earlier, I got the Bills and the Jags and Baltimore taking the 6th spot.
Shane is the next man up. Shane, we've seen your AFC picks again a little bit earlier, but to recap there, you had the Ravens, Bills, and Texans in the wildcard spots in the AFC. For the NFC, you've gone for the Cowboys, the Rams, and the Bears.
Yeah, with the Cowboys and the Rams, I think they will both have periods of the year where they will have 4 or 5 wins in a row, or 4 or 5 wins in the 6 or 7 week period. That will be enough for them to get to the playoffs in the NFC side of things. I know I was talking down with the Cowboys earlier, but I think they have enough to make the wild card spaces easily enough, just based on the talent they have. I just want to talk about the Bears and the fact that the Lions aren't in my playoff picks at all. I think a very key game this year will be Bears versus Lions. I don't know what week it is, but it's the weekend before Christmas, the 22nd of December, when the Lions have to go to Soldier Field and play against a Bears team who I'm convinced will be deeply in the hunt for a wild card spot, or even at that point, top in the division. Although I think the Packers will end up top in the division. It is in those games that I believe that part of Dan Campbell's philosophy, which is his point of difference, which is the reason why they got so far last year, becomes a weakness against teams which have a sense of belief and have just a greater sense of situational football. And I think the Bears will get over them in that 1-1, and that could be a very, very key difference in making the wild card and not making the wild card, because I think the Lions are in danger of losing too many games in the first 4 or 5 weeks just because of the hangover of how last year ended. In the same way that Florida State came into this year's college game with a hangover that saw them being usurped by Georgia Tech. Now, no, it's a different situation, but I think there are some that can be applied to the Lions here. And I think the Bears, as I've stated earlier on this program, have enough momentum and enough talent to really make a playoff push.
All right, Noel's picks are next. Noel has the Cowboys, Rams, and Packers. Noel in the NFC making the wildcards.
Yeah, in terms of the Cowboys, I obviously talk about them. I mentioned earlier, I think they'll regress a bit. Well, they've won 12 games the last 3 seasons. So, I think they can regress to 9 or 10 and still make that wildcard spot. I do really like the Rams. I like what they've got on offense, especially. But obviously, we mentioned that they have filled gaps on the defense with two really good defenders coming in. And then the Packers, again, I talk about, a young team. For me, Love hasn't been the question of Love hasn't been answered yet, and those young kind of wide receivers and attacking players. But I do think if they trend the way they were last season and they do keep going the way they're going, then I think they are very talented and they will challenge for the division. And if they don't make it, then I do think they will be good enough then to hit that wild card spot.
All right, as we reveal my wildcard picks, you'll see that interestingly, despite the fact that we have two Bears fans on the show, the only person who actually picked the Bears to make the wildcard was Shane. So I have the Cowboys. I said I don't think they're going to quite have enough to top the Eagles in the East, but I do think they're still going to make the playoffs. I still think they're a decline in force, and I think it's the same old. Unfortunately, Cowboys fans, I think you're one and done in the playoffs when you do get there. The Rams, I think, are a very intriguing prospect, as we were saying a little bit earlier. It's too much of an ask for them to get by the 49ers in the West, but they're a dangerous one in the playoffs. Not one I'd particularly want to face, I have to say, if it was me. And I still think while they showed very strongly towards the back end of the stretch last year and made the playoffs, as I predicted they would this time last year, to tap my to beat my chest on that one. I do think the Packers will make the playoffs again. I do think it'll be as a wild card. Again, based on what they did to the Cowboys last year, not a team you would particularly want to face, and will very much have that mantle of a team you'd rather avoid as a potential banana skin in the playoffs. We are, as you'll have seen, for those of you watching us live, we're back very much in regular season mode, and we're back again live next Monday. That's the 2nd of September, where we'll be looking through some of the individual player awards or making predictions on who we think are going to be the MVP of the season, Offensive Player of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year. We'll also give our Super Bowl picks on Monday, and little bit of a sneak peek or teaser. We will have a nice competition to go along with that. So please do make sure and tune in on YouTube Live, on Facebook, or indeed on X or Insta, where you can see the Irish NFL show live. If you don't get a chance to look at us live, you can pick us up on your favorite podcast platform. And do please remember to like and subscribe. Thanks again to everybody who's tuned into us live this evening, and also to you, all of you listening back to us on the podcast of the show. And welcome to all our new listeners. And we met many of you while we were out at the college game over the weekend. It was brilliant to see just how the community is growing, and to get a chance to watch some live football action together. There'll be plenty more to come as the regular season progresses. We got 17 weeks of it. We got the playoffs, and we cannot wait.